I always considered myself an introvert. While my friends thrived in social settings, I often found solace in the quiet corners of my home, surrounded by books and art. But this time, my solitude felt more oppressive than comforting. I had just moved into a new apartment in a sprawling complex on the outskirts of town, a place I had chosen for its affordability and proximity to my job. It was my first real venture into adulthood. No roommates, no parents hovering over me. I should have felt liberated, but instead, I felt uneasy. The apartment was small but charming, with large windows that let in streams of natural light. However, as I sat alone in the living room, unpacking the last of my boxes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the unsettling quiet of the complex, or perhaps the unnerving stares I had received from some of my neighbors when I first moved in. Whatever it was, I couldn't ignore the persistent prickle of anxiety that had settled in my chest. On my third day in the apartment, I decided to take a walk around the complex to familiarize myself with the area. As I strolled through the grounds, I couldn't help but notice how meticulously manicured everything was. The grass was trimmed to perfection, and the flowers arranged with the utmost care. But amidst this picture-perfect exterior, a sense of unease lingered. I passed by a group of residents chatting by the pool, their laughter echoing against the stillness. I attempted to join in, but the conversation quickly turned to inside jokes that left me feeling like an outsider. After a brief exchange, I retreated to my apartment, feeling more alone than ever. That evening, I decided to indulge in my favorite pastime, painting. I had brought my easel and supplies, eager to lose myself in the colors and strokes. As I stood in front of the canvas, I began to pour my emotions into the painting, trying to channel the loneliness I felt into something beautiful. Hours passed as I worked, and I lost track of time. It wasn't until the sun began to set, casting eerie shadows across the room, that I realized how late it had become. I stepped back to admire my work, a chaotic swirl of colors that reflected my internal struggle. Just as I was cleaning up, I heard a soft knock at my door. Startled, I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Who could be visiting at this hour? I hesitated, then approached the door, peering through the peephole. To my surprise, I found a middle-aged woman standing outside, her hair tied back in a neat bun and a warm smile on her face. She looked familiar, and it dawned on me that she was one of the neighbors I had seen by the pool earlier. I opened the door cautiously. "Hi, I'm Barbara from 2B, she introduced herself, her voice cheerful. "I just wanted to welcome you to the building. I know how overwhelming moving can be." "Thank you," I replied, my voice slightly shaky. "I appreciate it." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes scanning my apartment. "You've got a great place here," she said. "I love the light coming in. It's so important to have a bright space, don't you think?" I nodded, feeling slightly uncomfortable with her uninvited presence. "Yes, it is." Barbara continued to chat as if she were an old friend, sharing snippets about the building and its residents. However, as she spoke, I noticed a strange intensity in her gaze, as if she were studying me closely. "Just remember, if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. We all look out for each other here," she said, her tone shifting slightly as she leaned in closer. "Some of us have been here for years, and we know how things work around here." Her words hung in the air, sending a chill down my spine. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. After a few more minutes of small talk, she finally excused herself and left, leaving me feeling more unsettled than before. That night, I tried to shake off the discomfort Barbara had caused. I settled into bed, hoping that sleep would come easily, but my mind raced. I kept replaying her words over and over. The sense of community she described felt more like a warning than an invitation. The following day, I immersed myself in work, trying to distract myself from my growing anxiety. Yet, every time I returned home, I felt an oppressive presence lurking in the corners of my mind. I tried to reach out to my friends, but every conversation felt superficial. I yearned for genuine connection, but it eluded me. As the week went on, I began to notice odd occurrences. At first, they were subtle, a flicker of the lights, a creaking sound in the middle of the night, but soon the noises grew more pronounced. I would hear footsteps in the hall when I knew I was alone, and the sound of someone tapping at my window. Though each time I rushed to look, I found nothing. One evening, I returned home late after grabbing groceries. My arms full of bags, I struggled to unlock the door when I noticed a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was Barbara, leaning against the wall with a sly smile plastered across her face. "Didn't expect to see you out so late," she called out, her voice dripping with sweetness. I forced a smile, trying to shake off the unease. "Just picking up some things." "Oh, you really should be careful at night. This neighborhood isn't as safe as it seems." "We've had a few incidents," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Incidents?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "Nothing to worry about. Just a few petty thefts and some strange people wandering around." "You know how it is," she replied, but there was an edge to her tone that made my skin crawl. After she left, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. I needed to get out of this place. I started to contemplate breaking my lease, but the thought of the hassle was exhausting. The next day, I decided to spend some time at a nearby cafe, hoping a change of scenery would help me gather my thoughts. As I sat there sipping coffee, I overheard a conversation between two women at a nearby table. They were discussing the apartment complex, and my ears perked up when I caught the name of my building. I heard the last tenant in 2A had a breakdown, one woman said in a low voice. They said she started hearing things, claiming she saw someone watching her. My heart raced as I leaned closer, desperate to catch more details. "It's creepy. I wouldn't last a week there. You have to be careful with the residents, too. They're a little peculiar." I couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation was about me. The more I listened, the more I felt a sense of dread creeping in. I finished my coffee quickly and left, my mind racing. That night, I decided to confront Barbara. I needed answers. I knocked on her door, my heart pounding in my chest. She opened it almost immediately, her smile wide. "How nice to see you. What can I do for you? Can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, come in," she said, stepping aside. The air felt charged as I crossed the threshold. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I've been hearing some things about the building and the other residents. I just want to know if there's something I should be concerned about." Her expression shifted, the warmth fading slightly. "People talk, dear. You can't take everything you hear to heart. Everyone has their own version of the truth. I understand that, but I can't shake this feeling of being watched. It's making me uneasy," I admitted, my voice quivering slightly. Barbara stepped closer, her eyes piercing. "Sometimes the mind can play tricks on you. You need to be careful who you trust around here. Not everyone has your best interests at heart." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt the walls closing in around me. "What do you mean?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You'll see. Just remember, I'm here for you. We all look out for each other." After that conversation, I felt more isolated than ever. I spent the next few days in a haze of anxiety, my mind spiraling. I tried to reach out to old friends, but their voices felt distant. I felt like I was slowly losing my grip on reality. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a soft knock at my window. My heart raced as I crept out of bed, peering through the curtain. There was nothing there. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. But then I heard it again, a gentle tapping, followed by a soft whisper. "Help us!" Panic surged through me. I stumbled back from the window, breathing heavily. I could feel my pulse quickening as I dialed 911, hands shaking. "There's someone outside my window," I whispered into the phone, my voice trembling. The operator tried to calm me. assuring me help was on the way. But as I hung up, I felt a profound sense of dread. I locked all the doors and settled into a corner of my living room, clutching my phone, waiting for the sound of sirens. When the police arrived, I rushed to the door, relief flooding me. They were knocking at my window, I exclaimed, trying to convey my fear. The officers exchanged glances, clearly skeptical. "Can you show us?" one of them asked. I led them to my bedroom window, my heart racing. But as we approached, I felt a strange sense of hopelessness wash over me. There was nothing there. "Mom, there's nothing here," one officer said, shaking his head. I looked out, my heart sinking. The area was empty, just shadows dancing under the streetlights. "I swear I heard something," I insisted, feeling foolish. "Sometimes it's just the wind," he replied. But I could see the concern in his eyes. "We'll keep an eye on the area for you, but we can't do much more without evidence." As they left, I felt more isolated than ever. I retreated to bed, pulling the blankets over my head, trying to block out the world. The next days blurred into a haze of anxiety and paranoia. I started noticing more odd behavior from my neighbors. Barbara would often appear unexpectedly, her smile as unsettling as ever, and the other residents would cast furtive glances at me, whispering behind closed doors. I decided I needed to confront Barbara one last time. I found her in the hallway, watering the plants near the entrance. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" she replied, her cheerfulness unnerving. "I feel like something is wrong in this building." "I'm not the only one who feels this way," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. Her smile faltered for a moment, replaced by a shadow of something darker. "Sometimes it's best not to ask too many questions. You may not like the answers." Her words sent chills down my spine, but I pressed on. "I want to leave. I need to break my lease." She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "You can't just leave, dear. There are consequences for those who don't respect the community." I backed away, suddenly terrified. "What do you mean?" But she only smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent shivers down my spine. "You'll understand soon enough." That night, as I lay in bed, my heart raced. I knew I had to get out. I started packing my belongings, tears streaming down my face as I hurried to gather my things. Suddenly, I heard that familiar tapping at my window. I froze, paralyzed with fear. I looked out, and this time, there was a figure standing in the shadows, a dark silhouette, watching me. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back from the window, fumbling for my phone. But as I turned, the lights flickered, plunging me into darkness. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I scrambled for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I burst into the hallway, desperate to escape. The building felt like a labyrinth, twisting and turning as I raced for the exit. But just as I reached the front door, it swung open, and there stood Barbara, her smile widening. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, her voice low and menacing. I pushed past her, sprinting down the stairs, my heart racing. I didn't stop until I burst into the night air, gasping for breath. The cool breeze felt like freedom, but I could still feel her presence lurking behind me. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys, and finally jumped inside, slamming the door shut. As I drove away, I looked back at the building, my heart heavy with fear. I could see figures standing in the windows, watching me leave, their faces twisted into malevolent grins. It wasn't until I reached the main road that I felt the weight of what I had just escaped. I had to get far away from that place and those people. I drove until I reached a motel on the outskirts of town. My mind raced with what had just transpired. I checked in, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I was safe, at least for now. As I settled into the small, dimly lit room, I glanced around, making sure to lock the door. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear the echoes of the whispers in my mind. "Help us." I closed my eyes, hoping to escape into sleep, but the feeling of being watched lingered, and the shadows seemed to creep closer. I had escaped the apartment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was still following me.